Good evening, good night, everybody. And this is Miriam Grunhaus back again with Heal with Gold. I hope you all had an amazing, amazing Christmas and gearing up and preparing for the New Year's. As you come in, please say hello. I know that this is a complicated weekend. I wasn't sure if I should have a show because I know that people may have family, they may have traveled, they may be, too busy for the show. But I wanted to bring Becky a while already. I had an interview with Becky months ago, and I was so impressed by her amazing, amazing personality. And I just wanted to bring her back to bring her to the group so you guys can have an opportunity to also ask her questions. So without further ado, I am going to bring Becky. As you come in, please say hello because I see people in, but if you don't say hello, I don't know to say hi to you because I do not see who you are on StreamYard. You have to say hello for me to know who's here so I can say a proper hello. So please don't be shy. Say hello. If you need to leave before the end, that's okay too. You can always watch the rest on replay. But here is Becky Kekula. Let's hear from her. Hello, Becky.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you because, I interview a lot of people, and before I even had the live show, I've interviewed people for over 2 years, and it's interesting. Some people stay less in my memory, but some people like make such a mark, such an impression on me. And I remember their interviews and I remember their stories and I remember everything. And when I have a situation like that, I really feel that this is a message that I have to bring to the live show and share this experience with everybody. And it's not just about me telling the story, it's about them hearing from the person. So Becky, I told you then you were the first little person that I've ever had in contact. You told me also there aren't that many when you look at the population, right? And I was so impressed by you, by your amazing, huge personality and what you're doing. So I want you to first introduce yourself, but tell your story. Tell about your experiences about growing up, going to college, managing in a regular world where everything is made for taller people, and then what you decided to do about it, because I really want to inspire people. I thought that you were a perfect show to end 2020. And the reason was because so many people, we have complaints, right? We complain about the things that we don't like, that we don't appreciate. But what are we doing about those things? Sitting and complaining does nothing. But you took, and you took charge of your world and you did something about it. And I was so impressed by you. And I just want to say something. We have a bunch of people here and people are not saying hello. Guys, say hello so Becky knows that you're here. So don't be shy. But Becky, please start telling your story because they're here for you, not for me.
Oh, well, thank you. As most of you are aware, based on the introduction and the bio, I am a person with dwarfism. That means at 36 years old, I stand 4 feet tall. I stopped growing at around age 15 and have continued to figure out how to adapt to living in a world that was not made for me. So growing up, I grew up in a household where I was the only person with dwarfism, and this is very common. 80% of people with dwarfism are born into average height families, meaning that they're over 4 feet 10 inches. So the classification for dwarfism is 4 feet 10 inches and below. There are over 400 types of dwarfism. I have the most common type of dwarfism, which is called achondroplasia. But there are still 399 other types, and some people don't receive their diagnosis until they're maybe 7 or 8 years old. But I was fortunate to receive my diagnosis the day I was born because one of the nurses in the delivery room where my mom was having a C-section had seen a little person be born before. My parents did not know what that meant for my future. They just thought, okay, we have this child, she has dwarfism, what does that mean? And they went and sought guidance in every possible way, tried to find as much research materials they could around the topic of dwarfism. They were able to find a few brochures, but back in 1984, there wasn't a ton of information. There's an organization called Little People of America that has built its strength more recently, but even back then, there just weren't enough resources. And one of the resources that was recommended to them was a local hospital that was not the hospital where I was born, but it was after we were released from the hospital where I was born. And they were told to go meet with a geneticist who could give them some guidance on what it meant to have a child with dwarfism. They end up getting to the appointment and they check in with the receptionist at the hospital where the geneticist worked. And they were told that they need to follow the signs down the hallway that say birth defects, hit the elevator button for the floor that says birth defects, and then go down the hallway past another sign that says birth defects. And then their genetic counselor will be there waiting for them patiently. And after seeing all those signs, I don't really know how much information resonated when they met with the genetic counselor. And it really shows that it's important that you market yourself in an authentic way. And this person was a genetic counselor. They were not a birth defects expert, or birth defects is a terminology that new parents do not want to hear,
Right.
especially when you're trying to seek out trusted guidance. And fortunately, they were able to write a letter to the hospital and convince the hospital to change those signs from birth defects to genetics, like straight to the point. Let's just talk about what it is versus trying to buffer it up and use such terminology that feels offensive to a lot of people. And after that, it took about 6 months until my parents were able to find a specialist in dwarfism specifically who was in Baltimore, Maryland. I grew up in the Boston area, about 12 miles south of Boston, and my parents were willing to drive to Baltimore, Maryland to find a doctor who was known to be an expert in this space. He had waiting rooms full of people. It was expected to go and wait for 8 hours in order to see him at least once a year for an appointment, but it was very much worth it. So when my parents were able to sign up to even get into this practice, they signed me up for a sleep study. It's very common for people with dwarfism to have sleep apnea because a lot of the organs and veins and nasal canals and ear canals are narrow just because we're a smaller stature. And it was important for them to sign me up for the sleep study to get some advice to see if I needed any sleep aids. And because they signed me up for that sleep study, I was able to get an appointment with this doctor who was in high demand. And we got to the doctor's office. He had a waiting room full of people. He saw the scared, ghostly look on my parents' faces, and he called them in, even though he had a waiting room full of people. And it was definitely not really their turn next, but he wanted to put them at ease, answer any questions they had, any hesitations they had about my future. And after meeting with them for about an hour's time, he definitely made them feel a lot more confident about what the future had in store for me, even though there were going to be some medical complications. And he just gave them any piece of guidance they needed throughout my years. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave them was to try to keep me in the same school system so I could be alongside my average height peers who I knew from day one. Because if you keep me in that same school system, same environment, there are less likely to be people who are curious in a negative way, who may make comments, make laugh or stare or point, because the community knows me and I grow up in the community, and it's just a little bit more of a buffer than being part of a family where you have to move all the time. And a lot of times families can't control that. But fortunately, my parents were able to control that, where I was able to go into the school system and stay in the same school system. Of course, you're switching from elementary to middle school to junior high school to high school, meeting new people along the way, but it wasn't as daunting because I was with a lot of the same people. And that really allowed for me to have a pretty smooth school experience up until I got to kind of that stage where I was looking at colleges. And one of the reasons I chose the college where I attended was Providence College in Rhode Island, was because there was a person with dwarfism in the cafeteria when I was going on tour there. I had applied to 9 colleges, but that was the only college where I saw someone like me. And a reason why this is a big deal is there are only 30,000 people with dwarfism in the United States, a few 100,000 in the world. So in most scenarios, people have not seen another person like me. And that's why the media has a big impact on how people perceive us. Because if they see us in a positive light, they're going to be respectful. But if they see us in a negative light, which unfortunately historically has been more of the case, they're going to react to us in a negative way. And they're going to trust media's portrayals because that's the only thing they know about us. And historically, we're still just the last group of people that it's kind of been acceptable to laugh at us because of our differences, because there are so few of us. So I was a marketing major in college, and I started to kind of stumble on different internship experiences that were related to the entertainment industry. And I was able to learn that that industry has a strong impact on the way that people view society. And I became really curious about how I could make an impact in a medium that affected the entire world. So after college, I moved from Providence, Rhode Island to Los Angeles, California. I was supposed to work for a talent manager after having several internship experiences related to the industry. I felt that I was qualified to go work for this person. Unfortunately, it fell through when I got to California. But when I moved out there, my parents were willing to support me if I had a job and a place to live. So I secured the place to live and the job. And then once I got there, it fell through. So I continued to have that pressure of like, you better get a job fast or you're coming back home. So I worked really hard to treat it like a job, looking for a job. And I ended up sending out 1,000 resumes, and I went on 100 interviews over the course of 4 months.
Which is incredible on its own. Right? You really took finding a job, like you said, as a job. I wish more people look at it this way.
I think it was like one day where I was like, I'm just going to take one break today. But like, other than that, I was driving all around town, sometimes looking on buildings to see what the sign said, to see if they were potential companies to apply to. And then I ended up having luck going through some temporary placement agencies. So it's like an agency that acts on your behalf. You go and interview, then they pitch you to go show up at jobs. And I really appreciate that model, that it exists, and wish I had found it earlier in my search. And you could get the feedback you needed. So one of the biggest struggles I think I had during that whole process was I was just going through the motions. And it's very possible that after 4 interviews and driving around Los Angeles where there's a ton of traffic all day, I could have been exhausted, and it could have shown in those interviews. I could have not delivered very well in half of those interviews, but nobody was telling me. It was clear that my resume qualified me to get in the door for an interview, but nobody told me if I was not performing well in the interview itself. And if I had that feedback, I think I would have handled the process a little differently. But it really was just going through the motions, just dedicated to figure out, like, how do I just get a job? And it wasn't that I was applying for CEO roles. These were entry-level jobs that my internship experiences had allowed me to qualify for, but I wasn't looking like very far beyond those assistant level jobs because I knew I needed to prove myself more before that could happen. So after about 4 months, I spent a month working at the Hallmark Channel in the marketing department around the holidays. It was a lot of like gifting because especially a lot of different entertainment companies are very big on making sure they give the right gifts to all of their clients during the holiday season. It was truly just a one month temporary assignment. But then after that, I was asked to show up at a talent agency where they represent a lot of big name actors, producers, writers, directors, athletes, and in marketing specifically, but it was Hispanic marketing. So I go and show up, and unfortunately I took French in high school and did not take Spanish, and wish I did. But I was able to meet someone who at the time was my boss for this temporary assignment, who was willing to invest in me, willing to be a mentor, and willing to advocate on my behalf. And when there was an open position in the entertainment marketing department, which matched more of my qualifications and didn't require learning another language, she helped me get to that place and didn't let go after the month when the HR department called and said, your term's up. She fought for me to make sure that I could stay until there was the right opportunity for me. And I was still going to try really hard with those barriers, but there was going to be someone to assist me and help me manage the process until there was another place for me. And that was really huge because I was exhausted from searching for that long. And then through the process, I was there for 5 years. After 2.5 years in the entertainment marketing department, there were shifts going on, and I was able to work in the comedy touring department where we represented comedians who book tours all around the country. Obviously, right now it's a little harder for them to do, but they're trying to do it virtually. And one of the ways that I was able to get into that department was I became involved in this comedy club coverage group. So those agents that were representing comedians weren't able to go to every show every night of the week or the multiple shows that happen every night of the week. So they asked for assistance from people in other departments to go and check out the shows. And it allowed me to start to develop an eye for talent. And it allowed me to go above and beyond to try to figure out if there was a place for me in that department. And after about 4.5 years there, I was asked what it was that I was passionate about. I knew at that point in time, as glamorous as it sound did, I did not want to be a talent agent. I didn't want to dedicate my life to being people's agents and really just focusing on the money and how much money they can get, even though I've seen people who started when I started and are doing really well now, but it just wasn't the path for me. But as people started asking me what I was passionate about, I finally felt it was my time to say why I wanted to work in that industry. And I started saying, I want to figure out how to change what we see in the media because it affects how people like me are treated in society. And I was given a platform to be able to host a panel discussion where I brought together people with and without disabilities who happen to work in front of and behind the camera to have a healthy dialogue about how we can get more representation. And I'm saying people with disabilities. As a person with dwarfism, I proudly identify as part of the disability community. You may meet other people with dwarfism who aren't ready to admit that, but with the Americans with Disabilities Act description of dwarfism, it's a physical or mental impairment that limits one or more of life's major activities. And of course, I need assistance in some of life's major activities. And it's a strong community to be a part of if people stop being so fearful of the word and we figure out how to embrace it and how the challenges that we have to overcome every day to adapt to a world that wasn't made for us translate to the skills that we can bring to any work environment. So I brought these people together, built this social media platform on Twitter and Facebook, where to this day, I continue to share stories about positive representation of disability in media. I then spent a year working in television casting at a television studio to try to encourage more disability representation on TV. I did that for about a year, and then I had to make a hard decision. I moved back east, back home with my parents. I was about 27 years old, and I was trying to figure out what was next for me. And I didn't feel that the industry was ready for the change that I wanted to see. And I moved back east and lived at home, started speaking, started sharing my story. And then I continued to make it known that sharing my story is a way that I can help others like me and try to pave the way for the future for them. And by doing that, I continue to try to do that. And Since then, I've also I moved to New York City after a year and a half of living at home, worked at the Actors Union, the diversity department, so kind of dipped my toe a little bit more back in the entertainment industry. But after doing that for about 3 years, I just kept learning that the industry just isn't ready. They're very image focused. And I was invited to work for a nonprofit. More recently, it's been about 3 years now, to work alongside, hold hands with corporate America to help them be more inclusive of people with disabilities. And really, my passion and drive is because I don't want what happened to me when I was applying for jobs to happen to other people. I want people with disabilities to be given a chance, at least given a chance to be successful in the interview process. And that takes receiving constructive feedback and also getting the support they need to move up within an organization rather than just being that assistant for life.
That's incredible. So tell me a little bit about this experience. Are you working directly with the corporations and also with people with disability? Are you giving this feedback? Like, how does it work?
Yes, so I work for an organization called Disability In, where we support business in their journey to advance disability inclusion and equality worldwide. And there is a program within the organization called the Next Gen Leader Program, which is geared towards college students and recent graduates who all have disabilities. And they must have a disability in order to be part of the program. And they get matched with our corporate partners. So people who sit within major corporations, Fortune 1000 companies, who can give them the feedback they need to succeed. It's a 6-month program. And then after they graduate from that program, a lot of them are offered internships and job opportunities. And they're able to get that training that they need to be successful.
That's fantastic. Now, from the side of the corporation, do they have to make certain modifications to accommodate the influx of those new employees that have a difference in ability?
It's a surprisingly low number of accommodations that companies really have to make. The cost factor is minimal. I think there's a major assumption that it's a lot more than it really is. And a lot of it starts with companies being fearful of using the wrong terminology. So what's really important is to make sure that employers are equipped with etiquette, which helps them get out of their own way.
Do they have an obligation to have a certain amount of employees with disabilities? Is that a thing?
Any corporations who have a contract with the federal government, meaning they're a federal contractor, are required to have a 7% hiring goal of people with disabilities. It's a hiring goal, but they're also held accountable to give progress reports on how they're working towards that goal.
How can the community at large? I wanted to bring you because, first of all, you were the first person that I had any contact about dwarfism. And after the conversation I had with you, I was walking around my kitchen and my this, and I was like, if Becky was here, could she, how would I be a host? Would I, in a way that I made you feel comfortable and part of my family? And I was noticing that I didn't even know enough to accommodate somebody with those differences. And how do you feel? Like I asked you in our conversation about networking events, right? It's very busy. Everybody, there's this loud noise. I asked you how did you feel if people leaned down to be able to hear you in a place that had a lot of sound? And you told me ideally we would sit because if we sat together, then it didn't feel like that. So tell us a little bit about it, because I think that a lot of times people just don't know. I didn't know, and I was blessed. I felt really blessed that you made me feel comfortable to ask these questions. And the reason I was asking is because I want to know so I can treat people with disabilities better. And there's no way that I can know if we don't have open conversation. And I was just so grateful that you're so open So I want to know if you can share with us like this etiquette that you said that company must have, we all must have.
Right. It's important to ask questions and not make assumptions. And what you said about just not knowing, it's okay to not know. But it's important for you to admit that you don't know so then someone can help you get there. I like to remind people like the grocery store experience. I prefer if someone lets me know if they're in the aisle where I'm trying to reach something. I prefer if they let me know that they're there to help if I need it. A lot of people will tell you they do not want you to help them without them trying themselves. So it may be clear that I'm struggling to get that thing I really need on the top shelf. So most likely I'm going to accept your offer for helping me. But it's important for you to put it out there because there have been many occasions where I'm in the grocery store and there's people shaking in my presence because maybe they saw a negative portrayal of someone like me and they think that I'm going to be that same type of person. And I know that they're not going to be the person that I can ask for help. So it's always nice to know, just have a peace of mind that someone is there and available to help if you need it. But then when it comes to like networking events, like we were talking about, like right now, the two of us, if we were sitting next to each other, most likely we'd be the same height. So I have an average height torso and shorter arms and legs. So that's why it is helpful to be able to be at eye level sitting down. But if we're in a networking event and there are no seats anywhere, and it would require us to leave the networking event, which we came to for a reason, it may be harder for us to set up that sitting option. And maybe it does need to be bend down just for a little bit, or maybe we could exchange numbers and plan to meet for coffee the next day or something like that. So you want to try to not make it too obvious that someone needs an accommodation, especially in a social setting where it's kind of outside of work and you're just trying to fit in. But when it comes to the work environment, it's very important for employers to put it out there that they're willing to make an accommodation from the job application process on the website to the interview process to onboarding to reminding them that they have a place to go even after they're onboarded to ask for the accommodations they need to be successful in the job. And accommodations, they're reasonable accommodations. So it's not like, oh, I need to bring a parrot to work. And if it has nothing to do with your work performance or accommodation needs, like those types of things may be denied, but it's things that can help you be successful. And I think you'll be surprised that people will ask for the minimal accommodations because they don't want to feel like a burden or that they're an extra cost or liability. And I think that that's just the general assumption that if we go down this path, that's what it's going to lead to.
I'm curious about the relationship between people with disability, because you said that some people still have a problem with the term disability while others embrace it. Do you find it that that is a divide, or that ultimately people just want to be together with people that understand their struggles? Because it's very interesting that in many groups or in minority groups, you also see divide. And you always say, why can't at least these people be united no matter what? Because
Yeah.
they're already so divided. They're already such a small group. Do you find it that the world of disability is united regardless, or there is still a divide between all the different disabilities or the way they embrace the word disability?
I think there's a divide because it really starts with your upbringing. And if your disability was accepted in your own home growing up and supported, and you were given the support to find strength in your disability, those people are going to be in a different wavelength than those people who just have grown up to complain about every little thing and how the world isn't coming to meet us where we are, even though we know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I work very hard to not bring politics or religion or anything that may be divisive in my advocacy, and some people may disagree with that, but I think it's important to just be authentic so we don't find more reasons to separate ourselves from the overall general public that we are a part of in everyday life. When I was growing up, I chose not to be involved with the organization Little People of America. And then I got to college and got really involved, and it to this day has been a big part of my life. So it kind of is different stages when people are willing to embrace and be a part of the community. So you will see people who may be the only person with a disability in their community and may be okay with it. And then you may see a group of people, a lot of people who have that shared experience of certain types of disabilities. There's definitely a divide within the little people community of those who people may call not as physically limited, and then those who may use assistive devices. So it's like those people who may use assistive devices may be more likely to identify as part of the disability community. And then those people who do not use assistive devices may steer away from it. So there's kind of that, it depends on your level of disability.
Interesting.
And then I think just overall, just people's perception, the whole society's perception of the word disability is they just think of like the worst possible case scenario. And even when you're thinking of the worst possible case scenario, those people can still find light and find positive in something that may seem like the worst of all cases.
Interesting. Yeah, I interviewed Eric. He was shot in the throat by a stray bullet, and he's became quadriplegic from it. And he told me, I've accomplished more in my life than people with fully able bodies. I got super emotional in his interview because I was trying to find out why was I so emotional, because I couldn't hold my emotion, and I started crying in the middle of the interview. And I wanted to figure out why was I so emotional. And I realized is that I didn't feel any anger in him, I felt that he's accepted his fate, and he said, I'm going to I'm going to live my very best life. And he can call senators and congressmen, and he has done so much for the disabled community because he fought for it. He wanted to have a caretaker that he could choose, and the insurances didn't allow them to choose, and he fought in Congress and Senate, and he really managed to do a tremendous amount, not just for himself but for the community. And he had no anger in him. It was like it was very emotional for me because when little things happen in our lives and we feel angry, and it's such stupidity. I mean, there's such bigger issues. And when you see somebody with a huge issue with no anger, it caught me off guard, and I was very emotional. I wanted you to share a little bit about you finding your husband, because it's such a small community. Tell us a little bit about it. And everybody loves a love story. So
a lot of people ask me growing up, like, oh, do you have a preference dating a little person or an average type person? As I was talking about when I decided to get involved in the Little People of America organization, one of the reasons was that there was a non-existing dating life up until that point. So I really started finding value in finding someone who I could be compatible with similar lived experiences of adapting to a world that wasn't made for us. And I started going to these conventions, and I ended up in a few relationships over the years. And a lot of times when you meet someone with dwarfism at a convention, so the conventions happen the week of 4th of July, usually like each year it's East Coast, West Coast, middle of the country, just so they can be fair to people who live in all different parts of the country who happen to have dwarfism, who want to come together and celebrate our differences. But I would travel to all the different conventions after I started going, and you meet someone in a city that may be nowhere near where you live, and then you both live somewhere else, because most likely you're not going to find someone you're compatible with in the same geographic area, since we are kind of all spread out. So you have to navigate kind of that long distance relationships and then figure out, does it make sense to take that next step and see each other more. And a lot of times it's trying to figure out if your jobs are going to allow for that. So with my husband, we actually met through Facebook. So I had met several friends over the years through the Little People organization. I was living in New York City. I was out with a friend and she told me about people she had talked to recently, but wasn't talking to this person anymore. But I was curious. So I just added him as a friend on Facebook. And a few days later, he sends me a message and we just start talking. And it took us about 4 months to decide to meet in person. He came to visit me in New York City. And then it was like every month, month and a half, we would try to see each other for a few nights. But it's really like you don't really get to know each other that well if you're only seeing each other in person for 4 or 5 nights at a time. And then I was fortunate to get a job that is completely remote. So this was 3 years ago in November of 2017. So it was about a year and a half after we started dating. And I decided to go spend more time with him. So I was living in New York. He was living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I would go and spend more time able to do my job remotely between different trips that I would have to take for work. I decided to leave New York City in May of 2018 after we got engaged in March of 2018. I lived in Milwaukee for 2 years and we ended up getting married in September of 2019. No, it was Labor Day weekend, but it was August 31st, 2019. And it was really just organic, trying to figure out how to make it work. And we were fortunate that our jobs allowed for, or my job allowed for me to move, get to know him more. And now we own a house back in Massachusetts where my family lives, and we're happy to just continue to share similar lived experiences.
That's fantastic because it's like you said, you're so spread out, the community is small. And when people say, how am I going to find, the person that I'm meant to be, my soulmate, and people feel like, how am I going to find? Well, look at here, I think that this is also gives hope, for people who are lonely. We're going through the holidays now. Now with COVID is even worse, but so many people are alone. So many people want to find their loved ones. But I think that when I think about your story and how you met, it gives hope to people that they need to just make the effort and be there. If it's on social media, if it's on apps, if it's friends helping friends, with ideas of people, because it's really important. It's very sad to be alone. We talk about disabilities and we talk about so many things, but just loneliness,
Right.
it's a horrible thing too. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, no, I am very passionate about you spoke up, right? It came a point that you were already not so in the whole entertainment. You wanted to find your voice. And that's why I always tell people, write your story, tell your story, fight for your rights, do the right thing and be there, because you don't know who you're going to help.
Right.
And you don't know whose life you're going to change by speaking up.
It's so true. It's so important. And it's funny, I keep telling people that I get a little starstruck when I see younger people who have a similar type of dwarfism to myself, or anyone with dwarfism or someone with a disability, following my story through Instagram or Facebook or any of those places. When they like things, like, it reminds me that it's important to keep going, and they're counting on me to stay strong for them and pave the way. And it's really nice to be able to give back to those people who I've strived my whole life to advocate on behalf of. And a lot of it starts with kind of my upbringing and having the support I needed to do well. And there may be people who don't have that support at home, but I want them to get that support in other places.
Fantastic. So tell me a little bit more about your parents. So they understood, they got knowledge, they're raising you. Were they the type of parents that they wanted you to figure out how to manage to do things? Did they do things for you? Because both are a way of showing love. But obviously, If you want to be able to be so independent as you are, it's better to figure out. But how were you raised in that aspect?
Yeah, and there were many times where I was just told, go do it. If I wanted to do something, I would get the support to do it. But they were also willing to be there to help me in any minute if I needed it. But they would wait in most cases for me to ask if I really needed that assistance so I could try to figure things out. I think what they worked really hard on, I have a sister who's average height and she's older by 3.5 years. They worked hard to balance our relationship and make sure that we were both being raised in a similar way, even though I had physical differences and medical needs that would come up along the way. But they really wanted to make sure that we both had the same support to find what we were passionate about and go after it. When I moved to Los Angeles, even though I did have the support of my parents, my dad had written me a letter saying, I always wanted you to be independent, but I never thought you'd be this independent. So I think sometimes they were surprised at how much I took advantage and valued that independence. And there were naysayers in the community who would say, why would you let her do that? You're going to let her move all the way across the country. Why are you letting her do all these different things? Like when I was sailing or swimming or soccer, like if anytime I got hurt, because sometimes it's just the nature of the game, people would react and they wanted to make sure that I could be a part of the community just like anyone else.
I didn't know that you were so athletic. You were into sports?
Yes, so not now as much,
Mhm.
but I played soccer from kindergarten to 12th grade. It was on the youth team, so it was every fall and spring. I did sailing from age 8 up until college. I did swimming. I was on the swim team at our local fitness club and then on the high school swim team.
Wow. I have to tell you something. I've interviewed a few people with some differences, physical differences. Some of them born with one arm, somebody who lost a leg to an accident, and every single one were extremely athletic. And I think that it was almost a way for them to prove themselves that they were able to do things. That I don't know if it, or it's just coincidence and I'm the only non-athletic person on the planet, but I'm like, you can do that and that and that and that, and it only makes me embarrassed because I couldn't do anything,
Yeah, I think also, so if someone acquires an injury that may even be athletic related, they may assume that they can't still participate in their favorite sports, but there are different ways to do it. Sometimes people may have maybe some PTSD, like afraid that that will happen again if they go back and participate. But in most cases, like there are adaptive ways to participate and be a part of these activities. And I think sports is just something that gives people that adrenaline that keeps them going. And I think you'll even hear that, like people who acquire an injury, whether it's a car accident or sports related, they may say that they were a hard ass person before and they really like took a minute to figure out what life's really about, and they feel like even though they're not thrilled that they acquired a disability, they're finding a way to embrace it more than they even valued their own life before the injury.
Very true. Really true. It's amazing. No, I think shows so much determination, but I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that you need a determination for everything in your life. You were raised with that type of determination and commitment. If you were raised like that, yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
I think that you were saying before, the division could be between the victims and the thrivers, right?
Mhm.
Those who feel poor me is one group, and then the ones that say, yeah, this is not great, but I'm going to make the best of it, right?
Right. And
And
that
then
even happens in the world of people who don't think they're having a disability.
exactly, and I think that those people that embraced it, I mean, you guys are, I think, better at work because you have skills of not giving up, not quitting, trying again, finding a way, finding a solution around. Like if you need to live in a big world where everything is made, you have to figure out certain things. Those are skills that you acquire on figuring things out that other people don't have.
Right.
I think that if you're a thriver in the disability community, you have abilities that can't be trained, can't be taught, really. And somebody's saying right now, we all have disabilities. Well, I wrote an article about it because I wrote an article about a woman who doesn't have an arm, and she swims with sharks. She horseback rides. She's a professional model. She did some TV. She did all kinds of sports. And I was saying, if I compare myself to her, I'm the one with the disabilities. She's the one with all the abilities. And I think this is a term, and I understand what you're saying, embracing the term, but I really prefer to say we're all, like this person said, that we all have disabilities. I just think that we all have different abilities. And I love what you're doing to spread the word. And I just hope that people get motivated to speak up in whatever area of their lives. In our group, we have a lot of people that are stroke survivors, and some people that went through specific traumas, abuse. When you speak in the area of your adversity, not only that you are more qualified to speak about it, but also it's one of the ways for you to thrive is when you use exactly what could potentially break you to make the world a better place.
Amen.
Right? So we're starting 2021, we're at the door, right? And I always say, people say, oh, thank God this year is over. Nothing is going to change. The clock is going to turn 12. It's going to be January 1st, and everything's going to be the same, right? I mean, you wake up, COVID's still around. Politically, it's going to be the same mess. What's different? And I really think that it's just a moment of renewal for ourselves and what we do and what we decide in our own little lives. What are the decisions that we make? Are we going to be strong, resilient, determined? Are we going to fight for what's right? Are we going to be kinder? Are we going to be more compassionate and empathetic? It's just a moment for renewal to make the right choices.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Living alone for 10 years and being a stroke survivor, you just get it done or it doesn't get done.
Thank you for that. Yes.
Exactly. If you speak up for yourself, I think that if everybody make a commitment this coming year, get to know somebody that doesn't look like you. Ask the questions, be kind to them, ask them what they want. Like I asked you, like, what would you want? Tell me. So I know that not everybody's going to have the same answer, but it's only by asking that we know what to do and how to behave.
And you'll learn. You have a lot more in common with that person who looks nothing like you than you could ever imagine. And just taking that chance to say hello, talk about your day. A lot of people ask me, oh, what's the preferred terminology? And I always say, I can speak for myself, but I can't speak for everyone. So you need to go get to know that person as a person, and maybe it'll come out what they prefer. But at the end of the day, just call someone by their name and you'll get to know them that way. And don't be so caught up on the definition of what their physical diagnosis is.
So true. So true. I think that because of the politically correctness, we're also so afraid already to speak, because no matter what we're saying, we're insulting somebody. Right. And as you know, I'm in my 50s, I'm dating myself here. And things that 10 years ago, it was totally okay to say and nobody got insulted. Now you can't say those things. My kids sometimes are horrified by it. And I'm like, guys, I need a new dictionary every year. What should I say and what should I not? But I think that what you said is get to know the person, call them by their name. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like you said, we have so much more in common. And I love that because we do. We divide ourselves into groups. And when we're doing that, we're robbing ourselves from enriching our lives. My life is richer because I know you. Could you imagine if I would have just not, gone for it, not interviewed you when we connected? I mean, it would have been such a loss for me.
Aw. The feeling is mutual.
Thank you. What is your dreams for 2021? We are, we're at the door. It's what do you want? What would be for 2021 to be your ideal year? What would you want to accomplish?
I think a lot of people have been talking about like it's important for us to enter with gratitude, especially when it will be safe to go back in person again. Hopefully we can do that before the end of 2021. Really take time to be in the moment. Still do those check-ins that are happening now during these times, like how are you, before you dive into the serious conversations. I think that even applies to the interview process. Get to know someone, talk about their day before you get into those deep questions, because it'll just set someone up for more success. I really hope to continue to deliver virtual speeches as many places as possible, and then physical once it's safe to do so. I just want to continue to be that example that the community needs and be the change that we want to see, and figure out how I can do it during these crazy times and continue to encourage others to do the same. I think it's important. More recently, I've had some people express interest in starting speaking and sharing their story, and I hope they do it, and I hope they do it well and succeed, and I want to continue to be that support for people.
Would you consider writing a book?
I'm working on it. I need discipline and guidance, but I do have it in the plans. It's just figuring out where to start.
So I came out with my book this year.
How was it? How was the feeling of getting it done?
Here's the book. Oh, it's an amazing feeling. And I needed some accountability.
Yeah.
And I worked with somebody. What the work was that he emailed me every day. That was enough for me to say, I need to reply and say, yes, I did my writing today. That's all that I'm quite driven. And when I put in writing that I'm going to do something, and also when you say it out loud,
Right.
Now that I know that you are writing a book, I'm going to send you some messages. Becky, how is it? Because when you put it out in the world, now there is, you need to be accountable,
Right. Yes, absolutely.
So,
hold me accountable.
Yeah, I'm gonna hold you accountable. It's a very emotional. The day the book came out was released on the day that was my father's year passing. The day that he passed a year later. So it was very emotional for me. And I obviously feel very connected, to him and from the book. But you're gonna feel a sense of accomplishing, of sharing this important message in a bigger scale.
Yeah.
Because you can only give one speech at a time, but you can sell the book and you can share this beautiful message. And I really hope that part of this message is encouraging people to speak up and to be kinder and all of that good stuff. Peggy is saying, thank you, Becky, for sharing your story. Happy New Year. Love you. Miri, thank you for doing what you do. You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
For being in the group. Thank you so much, Penny. Does anybody have a question for Becky? Now it's your time to ask. If you have a question, this is a safe space, so don't be shy. I find that sometimes we're embarrassed to ask, but then if we don't ask, we don't grow, we don't learn, and not everybody is that open. I spoke to some people that told me that they don't love to answer questions. They understand the need from the perspective of the person who wants to learn, but at the same time, they are asked so many times and they just want to live life, like, so it's a blessing when we encounter somebody who's here to answer. But in any case, for anybody in the Heal with Gold group, Becky is in our group, so you can ask questions in the group and she'll answer. Here's with apartments or privately owned housing, how does the Disability Act apply for accommodations? That's a good question. I mean, if you're renting an apartment, do the owners or the managers, do they have to do any changes to accommodate you?
That's a good question. I'm not as well versed in that area because I have not asked for them when I've been in apartments. I've usually just used a step stool to get around places. But I think you can work with the Department of Housing in the different areas that you may live in, or work with in major cities. It could be the mayor's office for people with disabilities that usually reports up to the mayor of the city. And I think it would be important to ask the apartment owner first if you could have an accommodation, and maybe have some backup information that it is considered a reasonable accommodation and you hope to get it before making the decision of getting the apartment. But I think you would want to make sure you have that conversation beforehand to make sure you can have the support you need.
Probably people with wheelchairs need sometimes wider doorways to get in, and bars in the bathroom.
And that may be, sometimes it's picking out the place that works better, but maybe there is only one option and you have to figure out how to get them to meet you where you are.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on each scenario. But under the Americans with Disabilities Act, you should have the support to get the accommodations you need in housing.
Very interesting. Becky, I'm so grateful. I love you. You inspire me. I am so happy that we met. I appreciate you sharing your story with all of us. And I really hope that 2021, everything will open up. So more audiences will be able to hear directly from you live, which must be a much better experience. And you can make a much bigger impact that you're already doing. So
Thank you.
The sky's the limit, right?
Yes.
Guys, I want to wish everybody an amazing, amazing 2021. And the power to make this an amazing year is within each one of us. We don't need anything external to make 2021 or any upcoming year the best year. It's making good decisions. It's like Becky said, it's living with gratitude. We had last week on Wednesday, we had an amazing lecture by Matana, and she spoke about living with gratitude. What does that really mean? And I think that if we work on that and work on being kinder to other people, we'll be able to have an amazing year, because it's going to come from our heart. If our heart is pure, we're going to end up creating communities and connecting with people that are like-minded, right? So how can it not be great? Melissa is asking, please let us know how we can follow your story. Absolutely. Becky, send me, you can message me on Facebook, all of your links, anything that you want people. I always post it in the Heal with Gold. If anybody who is watching and you are not in the Heal with Gold group and you want more information about Becky, just send me a direct message. All women can and are welcome to join our Heal with Gold group. Men, you can always watch it on YouTube, and I'm also happy to put this information on YouTube as well. So everybody, Happy New Year. Happy New Year, Becky. Thank you so much.
Happy New Year. Take care.
Thank you all for coming.